Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Marketly Hub podcast. I am your host, Edward Enejo, and we'll be talking about everything that gives you advantage so that you can thrive in your life, your career, or business. Today, we are having such an amazing guest. I'm excited to discuss about ideas and concepts that would help you thrive in your life. Let us dive in. Okay, welcome to the Marketly Hub podcast, where we talk about ideas that give you advantage in your life, your business, and your career so that you can thrive. And today we have an incredible personality here. Her story is an inspiration. We have Dr. Yekemi Otaru. She is the founder of Ventures Limited. And before that, she had gone through several transitions. And today she's here to talk about her story. Welcome to the show, Dr. Yekemi. We're so excited to have you here. I'd like to start with two questions, okay? Kind of like breaking the ice. Like, what are you thankful for? And what are you excited about?
Oh, wow. Those are such great questions. First of all, thank you for having me, Edward. I really appreciate it. It's always nice to be able to share my story and to inspire others. So, what am I thankful for? You know, if you had asked me this a year ago, I maybe would have been a bit caught off guard. But because of the transition I've gone through over the last few weeks, I've actually been noting what I'm thankful for almost on a daily basis as part of my, I guess, rejuvenation, recovery, and, refresh, if you like. And I'm thankful for the human spirit. I'm thankful because the way we are made, that human spirit always keeps fighting. And every day is an opportunity to start again. So whatever happened yesterday, you wake up the next morning and it's the start of a new day. And it's an opportunity to start again. And I appreciate that more now than I ever did. So I'm really thankful for that. I'm also thankful for the community I have around me. Sometimes we take it for granted that we have, whether it's friends, family, business associates, sometimes we take it for granted, but it's really when you have a challenge or you feel a bit weak or deflated or demotivated, and suddenly these people come around you in a way that you were not expecting. And sometimes even people that you may have just thought this person's an acquaintance, but then they show up big time for you, at a time when you really needed that helping hand. And also not to be surprised that maybe people you expected to show up big time for you maybe don't show up as much as you expected. But I think we tend to try to do everything on our own, and what I've really learned and become grateful for is that I don't need to, and that I've got really a supportive community around me, and there's loads to be thankful for.
Interesting. It's just good to be thankful. And so at the back of that, what are you excited about, like right now?
Oh, I'm excited about the future. I mean, the future feels really exciting right now. We'll probably talk about it a bit more later, but there are a couple of really exciting things that I've started working on. The first is launching Your Ventures and what that's going to bring, and the opportunities to collaborate with people and to work with more people, especially people from ethnic minority backgrounds. I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to be leading on an interim basis a local charity in Aberdeen, and just learning so much and being around people who are so passionate about their community, that go the extra mile. And I'm just excited about the chance to be basically everything that I am at the same time. I've always felt like I had to choose one over the other, because as you said at the start, I am multi-passionate. I have a lot of interest and a lot of skills, and sometimes it feels like you have to put something on hold to chase something else. But to be in a situation where I'm actually basically doing everything at the same time and finding that they aren't actually exclusive things, they feed off of each other.
Yeah.
My brain is getting really excited by that, by the fact that I'm just kind of feeding off the fast-paced entrepreneurship and the kind of the slower social impact side as well. Mm-hmm. That's really exciting. And for one of the first times in my life, I'm like, I actually don't know what will be happening at the end of the year. I can't December right now because so many things are just coming up that are pretty much, stuff you couldn't have planned in advance. That yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited to see what the future brings.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's good to know. Up until now, I have known you to be, a chancellor with the university, an entrepreneur. You give, keynote speaker. Of course, you've won multiple awards. But now, social impact. Like, okay, that's a new one. I wonder what's next. But before we get into that, because we have a lot of people watching and listening to this podcast around the world, and they don't know you. So it'll be interesting to know your backstory. Like, where did you start from? As that little girl went through with some dreams, maybe the dreams, metamorphosed until it became what it is now. So can you tell us a little bit about your backstory, and what you had done, lessons learned that brought you up until this point? Just in a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's always difficult to know where to start because everything was kind of going in pretty much a straight line, and then it just came a point where it started going in slightly different directions, some planned, some unplanned. But yeah, to give you some background, so I'm Nigerian. I say obviously, it's not obvious, is it? I'm Nigerian
Yeah.
originally, and I've lived in Scotland for 20 years. And
Wow.
I started life. My dad was a Shell staff and he worked for Shell for almost 30 years. So I was what they call a Shell kid, if you like. Um, and yeah, I mean, you can imagine those days when it came to going into university, where I'm from, you probably become an engineer or a doctor, basically. Those are the options. And so I studied chemical engineering and I went to the University of Benin. And it was a really interesting journey being an engineer or studying engineering. Chemical engineering, if you like, was one of those courses where we had slightly more women or female compared to any other kind of engineering, which is partly why my dad suggested I studied that. And then from there, it always seemed like I was going to end up in the oil industry because, in Nigeria, oil industry is big. My dad was in oil, and it just seemed obvious with me studying chemical engineering. I was never fully comfortable with that, but it's one of those things you feel like that's your destiny, if you like. And then I got married actually quite young. I was 23 when I got married. And then I married a Shell staff. So I went from being a Shell kid to a Shell
Interesting.
wife.
Wow.
So I was like, oh man, I'm never going to live this down, am I? So we then, we were in Port Harcourt and I did my master's degree, which was a joint master's degree between IFP in France and the University of Port Harcourt. And I did my master's in petroleum engineering. So I was like, well, definitely now I have to go into oil and gas because I've actually done a master's in petroleum engineering.
Wow.
At the end of that master's degree, which was a scholarship from Total, which is an oil and gas company, I then moved to Aberdeen, to Scotland, with my husband because he got transferred here by Shell to Scotland. And that's where things started getting really interesting because I came here and a lot of people said to me that, I should probably get a job in the care sector. That's really the only place I can get a job. And I straight away just kind of rejected that. I was like, I hold 2 engineering degrees. Nope, I don't want to go into the care sector. That's not what I want to do.
Wow.
So I remember taking my bag with copies of my CV and walking down Union Street and going into every single recruitment agency and putting my CV in, just walking down Union Street. And eventually, Bryant Engineering, which has now been acquired, I believe they're now called CAMAC Recruitment, I think. So it was Bryant Engineering that ultimately got me a role at Total in Aberdeen, working in the reservoir engineering team, and I was a technical assistant. And I worked there for about a year and very quickly just realized that I didn't really want to be a reservoir engineer. And I was fortunate to then get a job in Schlumberger, now called SLB. And Schlumberger was a great place for me because Schlumberger was one of those unique companies that allow you to try different things. So I was an engineer, I was a production engineer, but because there was always this kind of sales aspect and commercial aspect to everybody's role, you then got exposed to the different different functions, if you like. And so it was there that I started to develop really some commercial skills, still being technical, still building reservoir models and and pipeline simulation models, but you go to the customer, you're in front of the customer, you're presenting your case, you're training. I was training companies on how to use PipeSim, which was a pipeline simulation tool. So
Yeah.
my technical skills and my kind of commercial skills were kind of just getting molded. And I was very fortunate to have a manager, Capella Festa, who kind of realized this kind of trait in me, that I was good with people and I was good in front of people, and would start taking me to client meetings, and gradually I
Wow.
became more and more kind of commercial. And it's a pivotal point because it was at that stage that I started to kind of look outside engineering, and ultimately moved out of engineering while I was at Schlumberger into
Wow.
roles. So I basically moved from being a senior production engineer to becoming a senior web analyst, which has to be the weirdest
Transition.
ever.
Wow. Like
So,
multiple engineering degrees, you have worked for a couple of years,
exactly.
now switched into marketing. Like,
Straight away.
wow.
I just switched from senior production
Senior role.
to senior web analyst. And at
Wow.
this point, I'd been in engineering for about 7 years. And if you include Total, actually eight, maybe 8.5. And I moved into marketing. And it was off the back of starting an MBA at Henley Business School while I was working for Schlumberger. I was doing that part time. That whole marketing and strategy piece really started to click for me. And that was
Wow.
ultimately what informed that move. And I remember going into HR's office and saying, "Oh, I want to move to marketing," and they just looked at me like I had two
You
heads.
did
What
that?
are you talking about?
Wow.
And it was a really awkward discussion and awkward time. But
Wow.
I'm ever grateful that they actually let me move. So there's no way I could have moved to marketing without that, because I didn't have any marketing experience. Yes, I had done a couple of modules in my MBA, but I didn't have any actual marketing experience. So it's not like I could apply for marketing jobs in other companies unless I wanted to go back to like the basics and be like very junior. But I'd already worked for 8 years at this point. So
Yeah.
um, I'm really grateful to that organization for allowing me to do the move. And that was where ultimately moved into marketing. And then I left Schlumberger and went to GE. I was senior marketing manager there. Um, and then I had a bit of a segue. You notice something about me. There's a lot of like transitions and
Yeah. You
I
just
don't know me.
pivot.
Yeah. People that don't know me are like, what? How did that happen? But I left GE and spent 4 months writing a book. And so
Wow.
I had this kind of period where I was writing a book about social media in large organizations, and it was inspired by my MBA, the work I had done during my thesis. And I then published that book in February of 2016. The book became top 100 in 5 categories on Amazon UK, and that gave me the courage to start my first business. So that was by June 2016. I had launched Yo Marketing, which was focused on strategic marketing, social media, really focused on large organizations that at that time were quite scared of social media. It was happening faster than they could really understand how to manage it. They were worried staff were saying things online that they shouldn't be saying, maybe exposing trade secrets, that kind of thing. And so my research was based on that. And so ultimately that was really the launch of my first business. And a lot has happened since then. I've
Wow.
launched other businesses, and I've changed careers quite a few times.
Yeah.
I've had some other things that were probably, I would say, unplanned. For instance, being asked to be the chancellor of a Scottish university in 2021, which was just such an honor. And so I took up that role. And yeah, and I know we'll go more into it later, but fast forward to today, I am chancellor. I've got another business that I've started after my previous business, or after I closed my previous business. And I'm also now in the charity sector where I'm supporting a local charity as interim CEO. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, you asked me what there is to be excited about.
Wow. That's an exciting journey. I mean, I see the transition and all of that. Like you 8 years in, you transition into marketing, and it's like 8 years later, I'm seeing a pattern here. 8 years later, you pivoted to start another. So maybe we'll be expecting a book. I don't know. Because I'm just seeing the pattern. No, that's the way
Maybe.
my mind works. But it's interesting to know. I mean, with this kind, I mean, that kind of mindset and the way you think and see things, and maybe you observe the pattern. One of my friends would refer to this as the accidental this. So like myself, I started as physics electronics. So I call myself the accidental project manager, because I didn't just start project manager. And while that may be, so the question is for somebody who thinks this way, there's a personality. So talking about the personality behind you, somebody said that if there is an animal that describes your spirit, what will that be? So maybe it helps us to understand your personality the more. Like, how do you do all of this? So what's your personality? I mean, if there's an animal that describes your spirit, what would that be?
That is such a hard question.
Wow.
I find it's such a difficult question. The only thing I can think of is it's probably going to be a species of dog. One of the, well, not species, breed.
Breed, yeah.
A breed of dog, because if I want to describe myself in terms of personality, and this is based on feedback from just the people around me, I think one of the strongest things about me is I am very focused. And also, I don't give up easily. So
wow.
I'm very kind of persistent, and I'm very constant in the things that I'm doing. And some of that can be actually a bad thing, because there are times when maybe I should have given up a long time ago, but I'm still going. There was one scientist that described this trait very well. He said, I sit longer with a problem than anybody else does, right? So it's kind of like that, like, where people will just try for a bit, they just like give up and just go to the next thing. I tend to sit, imagine the problem is sitting on the couch. I tend to sit next to it and like try and work it out. Like, tell me a bit more. So why aren't you budging? And
like have a conversation.
Having a conversation and trying to like get to the bottom of stuff. So I'm quite a problem solver. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a golden retriever. I don't know.
Wow.
In terms of personality, but it's not always good. And if you ask people close to me, like my husband, he would tell you, like, sometimes he just wants me to drop the bone, but I'm just not dropping it. And it can cause a lot of stress for me, a bit of anxiety, or maybe a lot of anxiety. And so I'm not even suggesting that people become like me. Actually, I think there's a real downside.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to answer your question, to be a breed of dog, probably.
Interesting. Oh, that's good. I mean, I could see a lot of things come into play there, but I mean, you will be in the best place to describe that. I find myself as a wolf. I have multiple actually. I have a wolf, an eagle, and a lion. I have a pendant as a lion. Back then when I was in the secondary school, I had a belt that had an eagle head. That is without knowing what the personality type is. I just saw it. I just connected with it, and things like that. So there's a pattern there. I'm sure that you put connect the dots, you would just see it. It's right there looking at you.
Looking into. I mean, I have this thing about elephants. I love elephants. I've got an elephant pendant and so on.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess my thing with elephants is that I just find them really powerful yet so gentle. Like if an elephant just made a big movement, it could actually just kill everyone standing.
Yep.
But yet, it's very gentle. It seems to be aware of how powerful it is. Very kind of elegant, if you like, in its movement, and doesn't show off its power in a way that if it did, it could actually cause a lot of damage and easily be the most dangerous animal out there. The movements are really, really slow and deliberate. And I actually came very close, like touching distance, to elephants a few years ago in Malawi.
Wow.
And I fell even more in love with them. I was like, oh my goodness.
Like you're just in your element right now. I can tell that there's a connection there, and maybe so there's an elephant somewhere, there's a breed of a dog somewhere. It's just good to get to use it to know your personality and what you stand for and all of that. So that's inspiring, really. Talking about inspiration, I mean, with your personality, who inspires you, like, to keep going?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I have a lot to be grateful for my family, but if I go even earlier than that, one of my earlier inspirations was Oprah Winfrey, by far. She had a really big impact on me.
Interesting.
As a teenage girl, I used to watch her every week and just be like, oh, I'd like to just be able to talk like that, to interview people. I mean, obviously the fact she was a black woman, I was like, whoa. And the fact that she was doing a lot of philanthropy as well. Yeah, she had a huge influence on me in terms of just her personality and her style. And so
Wow.
I would say that was one of the kind of early inspirational figures in my life for sure. Um, and then I think growing up, I just started to get kind of inspiration from the people around me, especially when I'm in really tough times. I just found that I had people around me that believed in me more than I believed in myself, which I'm really grateful for. Could be my siblings. I have a sister and a brother. Even when I want to give up, my sister will say, "Oh, you don't give up, just try." And then I'll like, "Okay, I'll try," and then it works. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm glad I didn't give up." And just going through the different stages of my life, there's been
Yeah.
different sources of inspiration, and my most recent sources of inspiration have actually been my children.
Wow.
They've been a huge source of inspiration. They see you in a different way to how you see yourself.
Yeah.
At times when I've been, quite stressed or needed to make really difficult decisions, I've been reminded that they just really want their mother to be happy and safe. They don't
Yeah.
care if I'm CEO of anything. They don't care if I'm working cleaning floors somewhere. They essentially just want their mother to be well and safe and happy. And that's been very grounding for me. That's been very
Wow.
grounding, that love is unconditional and it should be unconditional. And I think there's been a danger throughout my life that I attribute kind of love or respect with what I'm achieving and who I am. And I think that can be really demoralizing, and it's quite unhealthy as well. But I think with our culture, it can feel that way. If you don't get an A, I don't know about you, but like maybe your
Yeah.
dad today,
It's
or
the
they
same everywhere in
I
Africa,
mean,
in
oh,
Nigeria.
you got A, and then like, oh, do they have two heads? How come you didn't get?
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
it feels unconditional. You're like, and so that's been really grounding.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been
Yeah. I can.
inspiration.
That's interesting to know. You just talked about Africa, Nigeria, and things that happened there. I remember this incident, and my friend was just giving me his conversation. He came back with like he was third in the row, and he was excited. It was the first time he crossed that to the mark of the top three, and the parent was like, "What happened to the first two? What happened to the first two position? Why is that
Why did
not
you
you?"
come first?
Yeah, and I mean, no, this is interesting because I was having a conversation with someone here in Scotland, and he was like, everywhere there are programs, he see Nigerians, and most recently there's a video that went viral. There's a Kenyan lady that said, "You need to study Africans, precisely Nigerians," and all of that. But those kind of things are the things that pushes us, and you have your family support system sometimes to tell you it's okay not to be okay. It's okay. You're gonna, go ahead and still have a second shot at it and be better, and we just keep pushing. So that's, I will call, the advantages of disadvantages. That's the good side of the thing that we experience in Africa, but that's not setting us back. It's like a stepping stone right now to always want to push and strive for more. So when you talked about elephant, and I was like, okay. I mean, with the whole incident, you were starting a new business. You had been running a business for a while, served over 200 clients, and I could imagine that transition, how that would be. So talking about elephant, like addressing the elephant in the room.
Nice, I love it. Nice term.
So I'm sure that a lot of people are curious, like permit me to say, the Opera of Scotland has done so much. She inspires people. I must be honest with you, a chancellor, running business, and serving clients. And I mean, one of the pace setters, because it's more difficult when you're the one starting out something, because there's no playbook. You're creating the playbook, and that's what you have done alongside other entrepreneurs who establish their businesses here. Collaborating with other entrepreneurs as well. Talking about that, right? How was that for you to go through that process, and 2 months down the line there is a business, like all your personality coming in? But I'm sure that, or I suspect, I can't say I'm sure, but I suspect that it was not a straight line. Can you talk us through how that came about? Like, how did you manage all of that? And right now, there is another business, and you're still an interim CEO. Oh my gosh.
Oh wow! I mean, honestly, you saying it out loud is just a heap of emotions that come with being an entrepreneur and having to make the decision that we made. So, as you probably know, Sarah Downs and I started Ducaro in 2018, and that's the business that we both decided to close at the end of May. Just to say quickly, I think on top of being an ethnic minority, being a woman, being in a country where you're not originally from, to put entrepreneurship on top of that, there's a lot of pressure. I think entrepreneurs are kind of misunderstood and they're often unsupported, and a lot is expected of them.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that it's very difficult to really get the stories out that are not, oh, we've just won this contract. Those stories that are not necessarily of success but are of challenge,
Yeah.
are harder to find. And I spotted that many years ago, and I made up my mind that I was going to be transparent about my entrepreneurial journey,
Yeah.
because it's a lie otherwise, right? Because it means you're only saying the good stuff. And there are many businesses that have closed, many entrepreneurs have gone through what we went through, but you never really heard of it. It just kind of went quiet, and someone said, oh, I've not heard of this company for a while. And then you look into it and like, oh, they've closed, and no one said anything, right? So each to their own. I think with Ducaro, we were in business for about 5.5 years. And ultimately, we found that the consulting side of things was really slowing down. And so we were
Yeah.
primarily kind of consulting around sales and marketing and looking at really enabling these commercial functions. And I think I would say 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, we noticed this decline when it came to consulting. Companies were less willing to pay for a consultant to come and work with them. And there are many factors. I mean, COVID hit, and so the purse strings were tighter, and companies were looking at places they can spend money to get the ROI on that pretty quickly. And I
Yeah.
think consulting was looked at as like a nice to have. And so I noticed that companies were more willing to spend money kind of upskilling their team so that they have the capability within their organization to make change rather than bringing someone from outside that will, in some cases, the perception was they will come, tell them what they are doing wrong and go away, kind of. And so we're seeing that kind of trend kind of coming. And so my excitement when we were successful in securing some funding from Scottish Government around sales mastery for women entrepreneurs in Scotland. So that was really, I suppose, our first step to say, okay, does this have legs? Can we upskill the nation around kind of that whole sales piece, which is a really unsupported function globally, but I think particularly in the UK. And so over time, it took time, but over time it became clear that the market was really slowing down, and we had a difficult decision to make. Do we reinvest in this market, in some cases putting our hands into our own pockets to reinvest and change direction, or do we just call it a day and say, look, it's been a fantastic 5.5 years. We've supported over 200 clients. Through this period, we've hired probably a dozen people, maybe up to 14 people that we've actually hired, and their salaries. We've been responsible for their rent and their mortgage. Should we call it a day, or do we kind of try and like save things and move in a different direction? And with a couple of kind of personal changes on both sides, we ultimately volunteered to wind down the business.
Wow.
It wasn't a decision taken lightly at all. I mean, I personally didn't really sleep for about 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Mainly because, I had a team. I had a team that I really believed in, and yeah, it's never easy to kind of share that sort of information. And there's always pressure, even when you confide in someone and say, this is what I'm thinking. One of the first reactions is, oh, no, don't do that. Oh, you disappoint other people, you're going to disappoint. And
wow.
And so even voicing it out to close friends was difficult, and so you keep it in because they don't understand, and especially if you have a lot of friends that are not entrepreneurs and don't
Yeah.
understand that if an entrepreneur
It's a
has run a
risk.
business for 5 years and decides to close it, there's a good reason. Like
Yeah.
nobody does that lightly, right? So anyway, long and short is we decided to wind up the business, and we did it well. I'm very proud of how that went, the way we took care of our staff. I'm proud of us going through that process as a team. So Sarah, myself, and the team that we had, it
Wow.
wasn't easy, but ultimately we went through it as a team, and our culture really shone
Wow.
through that process. But I learned something really important during that period, which is
Okay.
that even though something is the right thing to do, it doesn't mean you don't feel bad about it, right? So it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt, even though you know it's the right thing to do. So it's not like you're feeling bad because you wish you didn't do it. It's just poof, that that's
The
heavy. That's
process
hard.
is
That's
painful. It's
really, yeah,
hard.
it's really painful. Um,
Wow.
and for a long time I struggled to even remember a time when there was no Dukara. I was like, gosh, I don't even like what happens now. But
Yeah.
time is so valuable. Time kind of makes you see things differently. You start to reflect, you rest, which is what I did. I spent, most of June and July reflecting and really putting a lot of notes down. I started journaling. Like I said, I had a great network around me.
Hmm.
Um, we weren't forced to close it. We could have continued, but it was a
Yeah.
decision that we made, which made it easier to heal from that because it was a decision that we made.
And it was a mutual
Yeah,
decision.
it was a mutual decision that we made. So what I can't explain is the fact that the way I feel today is very different from the way I felt, say, on June 1st, which was the day
Okay.
after we closed the business. Like my emotions went through this whole process. Some call it a roller coaster. You may have heard of the 5 stages of grief, right?
Yeah,
So
I've heard
that's
that.
a real thing. Like whoever
Wow.
came up with that graph, it was spot on. Um,
Interested.
I went from really just, in fact, I remember having a call with someone in the middle of June, a company in Edinburgh that was looking for someone with a marketing experience, and I thought, right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna just go in maybe as a freelancer and do some stuff for them. But ultimately, they were looking for a co-founder that had marketing
Okay.
experience, and I had a bit of like an allergic reaction to it. I saw that I was still healing. I just, the idea of being responsible
Hmm.
for a company that soon just made me like I just thought I don't really want to do this.
Wow.
Even though fantastic business, I know that I'll look back in a year and kick myself for not doing it. They had four founders already, great product, AI based. I know I'll look back in 1 year's time and be like, whew, that would have been such a cool thing to be
Yeah.
part of. But I just wasn't ready, and I had to be open and say, look, I'm not there yet, right?
Yeah.
Um,
We're going through your five
yeah, going
phases.
through the 5 stages, and so going back to starting a new venture, for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. I think I'm an entrepreneur if you caught me open. Even though I always say to people I was late to the party, so I was already in my mid 30s when I even thought I could be an entrepreneur. But ever since then, I joke that every week I fight off another idea. I like literally fight it off because
Wow.
I get ideas that often.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it just made sense to start something for myself and to build it, to take the lessons I've learned from, my past businesses, to build it slowly, to take my time, and yeah, to continue to create impact. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of the summary of the emotional journey. It's really hard to
Yeah.
describe
Yeah. I
how it
mean,
feels. It's really
I mean, it's a lot I could imagine, and one of the things that was very very interesting is how you showed your vulnerability. I mean, I follow you on LinkedIn. I see how you share your story. This is where I am now. I'm getting support. I'm going through coaching session. I'm journaling. For the benefit of those who don't understand or who are not aware of the 5 stages of depression, is there is denial, there is anger, there is bargaining, there is depression itself, and there is acceptance. I mean, there are different models out there, but essentially you go through that denial. No, it's not real. It's a lie. It's not going to happen. Blah, blah, blah. And then you get angry. Then begin to like, okay, like begin to like, maybe this is really happening. Yeah, contemplate about it. Okay, maybe it's really happening. Then you get depressed. Oh my gosh, it has happened, and eventually you
real.
accept it.
Not a bad thing.
Yeah, but I'm reminded of something that someone said, that you have to, I mean, to go up, you have to give up, and so giving up is a strategy sometimes. And in a situation where, I mean, every idea is not really every good idea may not really be your idea, like it's not right for you, and sometimes you have to choose, like, is this my own idea, like is the idea really good for me, rather. And I see you also, expressing that, or living out that principle, and you had to take your time, rest, get healing, and today you're here. Like, if there were 3 lessons you would say you learned from this entire process, what are 3 lessons you'd like to share with someone listening right now who probably is also having a first start, trying to overcome adversity, trying to be resilient, but the energy is not there? But what are 3 lessons you would like to leave with people who are listening or watching right now?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great question. I mean, the process itself, I think one of the things I was grateful for was that I was true to myself and true to my values. I think it's important very early on in your life to know what your values are. Know what it is that you want to be known for. Be recognizable. So don't say one thing one day and then say something else, where people start to kind of lose trust because, you seem to be saying different things, or as we say where I'm from, you keep talking out of 2 different sides of your mouth. I think it's really important to be very clear and recognizable, because when you start sharing, when you start becoming vulnerable, it just has far more impact. People can resonate with you, they can connect with you. Always be yourself. So I think it's just my long way of saying, always try to be yourself. If you find yourself in situations where you're not being yourself, start reflecting on why. What is it that's holding me back in this situation? Why do I feel like I have to pretend or adopt values that are not really mine? And make sure you get to the bottom of that, because the truth is, it can't keep on like that forever. At some point, it will come apart if you're not being true to yourself, and it will get harder to continue if you've been pretending, or you've been adopting values that are not particularly yours. The second thing I would say is be kind to yourself. As I said a few minutes ago, entrepreneurship is actually really difficult, and it's often just an ordinary person trying to do extraordinary things. So be very kind to yourself. Don't wait until you're burned out to rest. Make sure you have that support network. Have people around you that can be honest with you and tell you the truth. The worst thing you can do is have people around you who are tiptoeing around you and can't tell you the truth. So have people around you that can say, look, you seem a bit on edge, you're tired, that your eyes look dull. Take a couple of days off. Listen to them. Take care of yourself. Things will go up and down in business. We often joke in entrepreneurship that one day it's like, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire, and then the next day it's like, oh, Mo, I'm going out of business.
Wow.
Up and down, and that's normal. So it's not like there's something you're doing wrong that is causing that. That's normal. But make sure you're taking care of yourself, that you're being self-aware, that you're resting, and that you have people around you that you trust, so that when they tell you the truth, even when it's maybe hard to hear, because you trust them and you know that they have your best interest at heart, you can take that, right? You can take that because this person is telling me for my own good. They're not trying to, not trying to cut me to size or anything. They actually care about me, and that's the reason.
Yeah. And
I think the final thing is, don't see giving up as some kind of failure. I think that's a huge issue, and it was interesting going through closing my business. A number of times, I have a conversation and people say, you're not a failure. I was like, well, actually, there wasn't really a point where I thought I was a failure, actually. And maybe that's just, I don't know, some people might see it as arrogance or something, but I actually never thought I was a
So
failure.
you're self-aware.
Yeah, I felt like, okay, this business didn't work, so this business failed, but not me. Not I'm not a failure.
Yeah.
And so never kind of see yourself as in that you're a failure, because often what that does is it will stop you from making decisions that you absolutely need to make. And one core skill is knowing when to stop.
Yeah.
That is actually a skill. You don't want to keep going and just put everything into something that was never going to work because you're worried about what people will say, or you don't want to appear like like you're a failure, whatever that looks like. Actually knowing when to give up is really important. And if all
Wow.
those things that I've said, if you've been yourself, you worked hard throughout,
Mm-hmm.
and you've done your absolute best, and it still didn't work, then it's time to stop. It's not
Yeah.
something that you did. It's, businesses, they say something like, half of businesses fail within just a couple of years.
Three
So
years actually.
yeah,
It doesn't exceed the 1,000 days.
yeah. So, if you've gotten to a point like we did with Ducaru, where we
Yeah.
exceeded 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
actually, very few companies get as far as
True.
that. And
True.
so, those would be my kind of three key things: is one, make sure you're being true to yourself and to your
Yeah.
values, and you're not pretending to be who you're not. Second one, take care of yourself. Make sure that you're really looking out for yourself. You have people around you that you trust, that you will listen to, that will look out for you. Because it's quite interesting how many people will not be looking out for you. So make sure that you
Mm.
are deliberately,
Don't outsource it.
yeah, exactly. Do not. And finally, know when to stop, and don't see yourself as a failure because you need to stop. All the big entrepreneurs that we know in the world, um, we listen to their stories. If you get to the bottom of their stories, they are like on their fourth or fifth business. Whether it's Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, this is not the first business that they had, right?
Yeah.
So we always hear the juicy part, oh, my business is worth, 100 million and so on. But actually, they went through a few businesses before they got to that point where they now have a business that is worth whatever million is worth, or billions even. So yeah, those would be my
Wow.
points.
Interesting. That's like a masterclass, like a live session there, and you have got this opera thing in you all the while. Like, honestly, like, oh my gosh,
It's
it's
only because
just
I shared that with you.
interesting. No, it's interesting to hear all of this because I'm just reminded of someone who said that no matter how fast you run, if you're running heading the wrong direction, you never get to your destination, and you just have to find your true north. And I admire that courage to do that. Yes, people would say what they would say, but you are finding your true north. Like, this is, stop playing an environment that's very not giving the results you want, and enter the environment that will give you the results you want. And talking about stopping as a business, I remember reading something somewhere like, I think in Silicon Valley, they celebrate when a business is shutting down because they know that
I've heard
you're
that before
you're
too.
yeah, you're gonna channel that energy into something else to create something better. Like, instead of wasting time on something that or spending extra time, not wasting, but spending extra time on something that's not yielding what you expect. Like, they celebrate, when you close the door and like, okay, what next? And that is what you're doing. And so I'm sure that listeners and people watching this right now are thankful to hear that from you. So talking about new beginnings, you're probably like that phoenix that's rising from the ash and all of that. The experience you've given us, like, but you're rising. And so talking about new beginnings and the vision for the future, it's your ventures limited. So what should we expect from your ventures limited? Is it B2B? Is it B2C? What kind of services do you render, and where can we find you?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. So, Your Ventures is really all about providing strategic insights, and we're going to do it in different ways.
Okay.
So, one of my bread and butter skills is strategic marketing. So, that's certainly something that I'm offering to B2B
Yeah.
clients. But I'm really focusing on the strategic side of things. So, things like developing marketing strategy for new products into the market, things like crafting value propositions and ideal customer profiles. We're certainly doing that work. Also, we're getting strategic insights from customer and market research, and we're adopting some kind of AI tools as well to be able to do that. And so for companies, whether they're startups or already established organizations that are looking to really understand how their customers are receiving their products and services, really understanding where the customer wants to see something slightly different, that interview approach that we do, where we interview and we distill out the key insights from those conversations, we'll provide key KPIs for the sales teams, for marketing teams, for product teams, for operations teams, to help the companies to continue to improve, whether that is increase the win rate when it comes to tenders, or that has to do with customer retention, making sure that they keep their customers, whatever that looks like. This whole kind of research piece is really important. And then I would say the part of it that I'm most excited about is actually the learning programs, which is something that I've been passionate about for a long time, which is creating communities where peer-to-peer learning, is happening. And so, for instance, I'm building something now that will be really focused on helping people pick up on the importance of personal branding when it comes to growing your business. And so apart from the facilitated discussions that will happen in those communities, we're also facilitating peer-to-peer learning. Okay, so apart from learning from me or any guest speakers or guest facilitators I bring in, people can also learn from each other. And this really comes from me delivering masterclasses and workshops for many, many years, even going as far back as Schlumberger, where I used to deliver training courses, and realizing the power in the community. Because I often used to forget that, if you've got a group of 50 people and you teach them something, that's fine, there's some impact. But if you also create an environment where the 50 people can also learn from each other, it's just a far more powerful environment. So those are some of the things that I'm working on. Your Ventures is going to be big on collaboration. Even though, I'm a sole founder in this case, I'm still big on collaboration. And so I've been blessed over the last, couple of years working with different people on different projects and meeting some fantastic people. And so this is an opportunity to work on different projects with different people, and also to elevate my ethnic minority communities. I'm working on some free and very low cost kind of master classes as part of these communities to really help the ethnic minority community. So that is kind of what to expect. And so it's different from what I've done before, because I'm bringing in this kind of tech piece, and it's very much around the collaboration piece with other people, and that's going really well. So I'm pleased.
Fantastic. Wow, that's incredible. That's really good to hear. I did check out the website. What's the website? I mean, for those who don't know, what's the name of the website?
So it's YoVentures, just as one word, .co.uk.
Oh, interesting. I love the logo, by the way. I thought that was going to be one of your, observatory, you're doing research, you're doing insight, so I could see the connection and all of that. So I mean, for you as a person, that's really, really interesting to know. Obviously you have talked about your passion for masterclasses and all of that, and of course you can give what you don't have. So I imagine that you have done a lot of studies, or it's even your culture, your lifestyle. So I guess I'm curious to know what kind of podcasts do you listen to, what kind of books do you read. Maybe somebody could like, oh, I like that, maybe I should check it out. And like, what kind of podcasts or books do you read?
Yeah, so I have to admit, I've struggled to find podcasts that I love, which I'm so glad you're doing one. So I'm sure yours will be on my list.
Yay!
Yours will be on my list. I've listened to a couple of really good episodes of Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. So I really like. There's some really interesting topics he uncovers. Yeah, I've read some really great books recently, especially audio books. I find them easy just while I'm driving, just listening to them. The most recent one, which I finished I think 2 weeks ago, is called Hyper Focus, which was really good, and it was such a timely read as well. And it was really talking about how to be, I suppose, more productive and more creative using different focusing skills. And so kind of the hyper focus, for instance, would be, say I have a particular challenge and I would spend time actually focusing on that challenge and looking for solutions and ideas, and it just kind of grows because I'm looking at different alternatives, maybe borrowing ideas from another field, but it's all focused on this one particular kind of challenge.
Wow.
And the other kind of focus is scatter focus, where you actually just let your mind go. And that's probably what a lot of us are doing. If you go for a walk, you're just kind of letting your mind go. You might look at that bird and go, oh, interesting bird. And then you might remember, oh, what am I having for dinner? And then, that kind of focus as well, which is also very useful. I think the big thing for me with that read was it helped me become far more self-aware. The fact that I do allow my mind wander sometimes, and I've become so much better at bringing it back. So you can, when you're talking to someone and your mind wanders, even if it's for a few seconds, and then you come back to the conversation and you realize you don't know what they're talking about anymore because your mind has wandered off.
Yes.
And it's like a muscle. So the more you realize, oh, my mind's wandering off, and bring it back, you
Yeah.
actually get really good at listening, because over time it
Interesting.
becomes this muscle and you start to really listen to people. And I found that really valuable. But the book that's had the most impact on me just overall in my career is actually a book called True North. Which
Interesting.
one of my mentors recommended to me when I worked at GE. So this is probably 2014 or so. And I still have the book marked up with post-its and everything. And it was the book that really got me thinking about myself as a leader and the whole values-based self-awareness. It was just a really strong book, because up to that point, I thought leaders were like, they were over there, they were far away, they were like gods, and I certainly wasn't one of them. And so that book was really powerful. So anyone on that kind of leadership journey that wants to be a leader or sees themselves as a leader, but are maybe struggling with what that means for them, I would recommend True North. It's by Bill Murray.
Okay.
His name is Bill. I need to double check what the last name is. But
All right. We're going to get it and put it in the link of this podcast so people can go there and get a copy of the book. So that's interesting. Wow, interesting. I mean, you talked about 2 books, one podcast as well, Diary of a CEO. You also talked about True North and also Hyperfocus. I'm going to check out those books as well. I'm sure that people listening will also do well to check them out. You did mention about, the last book, Finding Your True North. So I'm curious, what's your leadership style as a person?
It's hard though to know your own leadership style. But I did recently ask my team how they read me as a leader, like what kind of leader I am. I mean, I like to think that I'm quite hands off, so I'm not a micromanager. And I always enjoy being a leader far more when I have a capable team where I do not have to micromanage, because it actually stresses me out if I have to micromanage someone.
True.
I think I'm a collaborative leader. I think I'm supportive. I think the biggest thing for me in my leadership is I like to walk the talk. So I see myself always as setting the example. And I would never ask people to do things that I wouldn't do myself.
Wow,
So,
interesting.
I see myself as setting the pace. I believe that it always comes from the top. If you go into any organization and you see rotten bits or you see parts of the culture that are not great, when you check, most of the time it's come from the leadership. People are seeing the leader
from the top.
late, or the leader doing things and then turning around and saying, "Oh, we don't do that." And you see that. So I certainly see myself as someone that leads by example, and is supportive of my staff. I think overall I'm probably more of a mentor style in terms of the way I work with people. I'm more of a mentor. I'm not really, wouldn't say I'm a coach. I like to distinguish between the two.
Yeah,
So
true.
I think that coaches are more, well, they can come from any work of life, and they're more like guiding you so that you discover the answer for yourself.
Yeah.
Like mentors generally have experience in that area and like tell you what to do in many cases and so on. I would love to be more of a coach. I think it sounds less stressful.
Yeah.
But,
Your passion is so much that you want to be
yeah,
involved.
I'm just impatient. Like I can't be bothered with this whole guide someone to the answer themselves. Like just tell them what to do. So yeah, that's, I guess, it seems as a
Interesting.
good thing or depending on the
The
situation.
context, yeah.
Yeah, the good thing though about self-awareness is you start to realize that you can't be the same kind of leader to everybody. So
True.
some people will need that kind of mentoring type, and some people will need more like instruction, especially if they're quite, junior, like they're just new, fresh graduate, need clear instructions. If you leave it ambiguous, they might not understand what it is that you wanted them to do. And I think
True.
someone very experienced and you start trying to give instruction, that could be really frustrating for them.
True.
Because you kind of micromanage. So the bottom line is I get to know my team, I support them, and I don't want to micromanage. But
Yeah.
overall, I'm always going to be leading by example.
Fantastic. Wow, that's so much value you've given us today. It's been interesting hearing from your story and all of that. We're wrapping up the podcast right now, but we have lots of people who are migrants listening to us. We have some people who were working as senior managers, having to come here like a fresh start. Some people have been running their business for probably 5 years, 8 years, and they had to shut it down and come to the UK as well. So based on all that you have experienced and all of that, you have similar story as well. The circumstances are unique, as different for everybody. But what advice would you give people in that, in that shoe right now? Probably they're thinking about, did I make a wrong move? Should I go back to wherever I came from? What advice would you give somebody in that space, like a migrant who is here, who is having a difficult time, and how do they overcome that adversity?
I know it's such a tough one, isn't it? Because adversity, depending on what the person's going through and the background, it could be different answers for different people. But I think overall, the first thing is always to be honest with yourself about who you are, what you want to achieve. Because from time to time, people are frustrated, but actually, they might not be being realistic about what it is that they can actually achieve, maybe based on their skill set, based on the network that they have around them. It might not be that realistic. So I think the first thing is to look at what skills do you actually have, what is it that you actually want to do, and what are the opportunities there. So that when you start to have conversations, so sometimes I will introduce people to different people when they say, oh, I have interest in this area, I will make the introduction. It's always easier for me when I'm talking to someone who has a clear idea of what they're actually good at and the skills that they have and what they can bring to the table. It's always more challenging when they've said one thing, but then you start to ask questions and dig, and it's like, but you don't actually have experience in that area. It becomes just tougher to help. So be really honest about what it is that you can actually do and do that skill set. Second thing is don't isolate yourself, okay? And mix with everybody, go to networking meetings, be open to learn. Don't come across as if you know everything. Always be a sponge and be absorbing things, and then just have an open mind. It really is important to do that. And finally, I would say integrity is a big thing, or trust, depending on what word. I just find that sometimes going day to day and doing the things that you said you were going to do goes a long way. It might seem like a trivial thing, but whether it's in the workplace, in your community, somewhere you were volunteering, if you said you're going to do something, do it, and do it to a high standard. When you do that, people are actually watching, and regardless of any prejudice that you might feel that is around you, everybody respects hard work. Like, everybody respects someone who is diligent, who does the things that they say they're going to do. So those are the three areas I would say. I would say, one, certainly be honest about the skills that you actually have and what you want to do. Okay, if you say you want to, be a wrestler, but actually you've never wrestled before, that's an issue. So let's have a really honest discussion about that. The second thing, is really around that whole doing what you said you're going to do. Make sure that you're diligent, that integrity and trust is there. And even if it seems like no one is watching, they are watching. Make sure that you're doing that. And I think the other thing I was talking about was just mixing with everybody, whether that's networking event, be a sponge. Don't feel like you know everything. Just listen. It doesn't mean you take all the advice everybody gives you, but just make sure you're listening. Make sure you're open and you're building that community of support. You are offering support and you're getting support. And what you see, the opportunities will start to open. People start seeing you in opportunities. They say, oh, I know someone who can do that. I know someone who said they've got this skill. And then your name starts getting mentioned. And ultimately, that's what you want.
Fantastic. Wow, this has been very, very interesting. I wish we could just go on and on, but we've taken so much of your time already. And I know that for myself, I'm going to listen to it again because it was so much that you were just giving us, so much tips and advice and all of that. I just want to thank you once again for making our time. And I guess the last thing I would just ask us in closing, like literally in closing, I'm tempted to ask three, but I'll just keep it at one. One thing I would ask is that what advice would you give yourself like 10, 20 years ago, like who's still contemplating a lot of things, and it's going to be very helpful to people who are probably in that junction of their life. So what would you tell them, looking at how far you've gone? So what advice, what one thing would you tell Yekemi Otaru, who is now, I mean, you are a doctor, but the Yekemi is not yet a doctor at that time and all of that, so doesn't know about life that much. But 20 years ago, what would you tell yourself? What advice? One advice.
Stick to your day job.
Interesting.
No, I always joke that if I had known how tough entrepreneurship was going to be, there was this kind of naivety that really helped, right? This naivety that, I'll just quit my job and start a business and I'll have tons of clients after a few months. This will be fine. I think that naivety went a long way, actually helped me. And no one tapped me on the shoulder and said, actually, it's really, really hard. It's tough. And maybe even if they did, maybe I wouldn't have listened. And so if I look back 20 years, what I would have told myself, I would have said, look, you are resilient and you are much stronger than you think. Everything that you want to do is going to take time, and anything that's worth doing is actually going to be hard, and kind of prepare me for that resilience journey. I think there was a little bit of just not being prepared and being taken by surprise, and also feeling whenever I did come across those challenges that it was something I was doing wrong, or maybe I'm not the right person for this, maybe I'm not good enough, because I was just kind of surprised by those challenges. And so going back 20 years, I would be preparing myself for that. I would say, look, it's a hard journey, it's a hard road. If it was easy, everybody would be going on the same journey, and really kind of reinforce that I have strengths that I hadn't realized that I had along the way. And I think if I'd had that 20 years ago, there would have been a lot less anxiety, a lot less stress, and certainly a lot less tears over the last few years.
Wow. This is so much rich that you have given us here. It's so wonderful getting to learn about you, what you do, and giving us some lessons and insight, like a blueprint, And we just want to say thank you from Marketly Hub, and thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much with us. And that's about it. We look forward to your book, if it's gonna come, because it's like I saw a pattern there, 8 years. But I mean, that was a joke. But whatever it is, thank you so much. We wish you well in all that you do. And if you want to know more about Your Ventures Limited, is going to be on the show notes here, how to connect with her on LinkedIn as well and other social media platforms. Thank you so much, our listeners. Thank you so much, our viewers as well. Do have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.